Let me set the scene. A woman's parents are going through divorce. Ugly one. The kind where people say things they have been keeping sealed for years just to hurt each other, or just because the dam finally broke. In the middle of all of it, her father gets drunk and tells her mother something. He and his cousin, he says, picked up a hitchhiker near the beach in the early 90s. They had been drinking. One thing led to another, and they ended up killing the man. They buried him in a remote stretch of sand dunes. Her mother heard this story and filed it away as something men say when they want to seem dangerous and keep a woman afraid to leave. She figured it was a threat wrapped in a story. She did not go to the police. She stayed for a while. Then she left anyway. The story stayed with her the way things stay with you when you cannot decide if they are real. Years pass. The daughter grows up not knowing any of this. Then one day the mother is watching the news and a story comes on. Investigators are asking for information about human remains discovered in a sand dune on a stretch of coastline. Remains that had been there a long time. They mentioned a distinctive item found near the body, a large belt buckle, Texas style. Unusual enough that they were hoping someone might recognize it. The mother went cold because her ex-husband had told her about the belt buckle specifically, had bragged about it, had described taking it off the man, swinging it, using it, had found it funny. She went to the daughter. She told her everything. And the next morning, the cousin called. He did not ask how she was or what she was up to. He said clearly and calmly that he knew she had seen the news and that if she said one word to anyone, she should know that he and her father would not hesitate, that they had done it once, that she knew that now. She stayed quiet. She had a daughter to protect. She told herself this every day for the rest of her life, which is how long she stayed quiet, because she took the secret to her grave. The daughter found out from her mother's private papers after the funeral. The daughter posted to Reddit because she did not know what to do with the information. The man in the sand dunes had a name, he had people somewhere, and her father, still alive, had never spent a single day being held responsible for what he did. The last line of her post said, "I have his eyes. I look in the mirror and I see him and I think about that belt buckle, and I don't know how to keep being someone who knows this and does nothing." The comment section had no clean answers for her. Nobody does. There is a specific type of predator who does not look like one, does not feel like one, is patient enough and clever enough to construct something that looks, from the outside, exactly like love. A user confessed to this in detail. No shame, almost no remorse, just the facts laid out the way you would describe a project you were proud of completing. He had become interested in a woman. She was not interested in him. She was interested in someone else, a man he could see clearly from the outside. He spent about a year getting close to her without her knowing how close he really was. He learned her routines, her fears, her anxieties, the texture of her daily life. Then he hacked her love interest's computer. He planted evidence, carefully selected, carefully placed material that made the other man look dangerous, like someone who had been stalking her, like someone with deeply disturbing tendencies that she should be frightened of. He fed it to her slowly, casually, like a concerned friend stumbling across disturbing things and not knowing how to say it. He helped her through her fear. He sat with her while she processed it. He went with her to file for a restraining order against a man who had done nothing wrong. He became her protector, her confidant, the man who had helped her see the truth. They got together. They got married. He posted this confession on Reddit not from guilt, not to turn himself in. He posted it because the whole thing had worked so perfectly that he needed someone to know how perfectly it had worked. He wanted credit from someone, somewhere. The comment that got the most upvotes said, "She doesn't know she's married to her stalker. She thinks she's married to the man who saved her." He replied, "Yes." That reply was deleted within the hour. This one is uncomfortable in a specific way because the poster does not think what they did was wrong, and by the time you get to the end, you will not know what to think either. A user grew up with a father who, by any reasonable account, was a genuinely terrible person. Not in the overstatement way, in the documented, consistent, years-long pattern of behavior way. He was abusive. He was controlling. He made the household a place where people survived rather than lived. The poster escaped at 18 and did not look back. Years later, the father was in a custody dispute over a younger sibling from a second marriage. The sibling was a child. The father had access. The poster knew things about the father that the court did not know, but could not prove because the father was careful in ways that protected him from accountability. So the poster framed him. Not for something he didn't do in spirit, for something very specific that the poster knew from experience and from what the sibling had quietly said was happening in some form. They planted evidence. They timed it. They walked it to exactly the right people. They watched the process unfold. The father lost custody. He lost more than that, actually, by the time it was over. The sibling is now in a safe home with their mother. The poster has never told anyone what they did. Not the sibling, not the mother, not anyone in the legal process who benefited from the evidence. They posted it to Reddit at 3 a.m. because they had been carrying the question of whether they were a good person or a bad one for years, and they needed somewhere to put it. The comments were genuinely divided. Some people said the ends justified the means and called them a hero. Some said they had made themselves into the same thing they were fighting by manufacturing evidence, regardless of what the truth was underneath it. Some said the truth about the father was not the same as proof, and not conflating the two, even in this case, was a line that should not be crossed. The poster read every comment, replied to none of them, logged off. The account has not been active since. This one was posted by a man on behalf of his girlfriend because she was too shaken to write it herself. They lived in rural Illinois, near rivers and creek beds that produce heavy fog on cold nights. He wrote that the fog was significant. She had been driving home alone around 1 a.m, back roads she knew well, roads she had driven hundreds of times. Then she saw something in the road. It was crouched on the right side of the lane, small, roughly child-sized. She rolled down her window because her first instinct was that a child was hurt on a rural road at midnight. She called out. No answer, but the shape kept making a sound she could only describe as sobbing. Low, wet, rhythmic. She pulled over. She got out. She walked toward it. It stood up. When it rose to full height, it was well over 6 feet. The movement was wrong. Not the way a person unfolds from a crouch. The joints moved in a sequence she could not describe with normal language. It turned toward her. She did not describe the face. She only said she saw enough to start running. She ran back to her car, locked the doors, and drove. She called her boyfriend the moment she had signal, crying hard enough he could barely understand her. He drove toward her and met her part way. She would not get out of her car until he was standing right next to the door. They went back the next morning. Nothing there. The road looked like every other road. He wrote, "She has been a skeptic her whole life. She makes fun of ghost stories. Whatever she saw that night changed something in how she moves through the world. She does not drive that stretch alone anymore. She will not." A night shift worker at a long-term care facility posted about something that happened on a call at 2:59 in the morning. A lucid elderly woman, one of the sharpest residents on the floor, someone who remembered names and noticed haircuts, had rung her bell. When the worker arrived, the resident was sitting up calmly and asked them, matter-of-factly, to remove the dark figure without a face that was standing in her bathroom. The worker checked. Empty. The resident looked at them patiently, waiting for them to catch up. She said it was still there. She said it had been there for a few nights, but tonight it was closer. The worker checked again. Nothing. They stayed and talked for a while. The woman asked about the worker's kids. She said the night staff worked too hard. She did not mention the figure again. She died at 6 a.m. When the worker posted this, the comments that followed were unlike anything normally seen in those threads. Dozens of nurses, aides, hospice workers all came forward. Different facilities, different countries, different decades, all describing the same thing. patients in their final days describing dark figures, faceless presences, things standing in corners or doorways, always calm, always specific, always very close to the end. A hospice nurse with over 20 years' experience wrote, "I used to reassure them that nothing was there. I stopped doing that after a while, because who am I to tell them what they can see?" This one was posted by someone who grew up in a house with a specific, consistent, recurring presence. And what makes it different from most ghost stories is not the figure itself, it is the confirmation. The poster was a teenager when they first noticed it, a dark figure that came out of the closet during sleep paralysis episodes, all black, human-shaped, wearing what they could only describe as a farmer's hat. It would stand and look at them for a moment, then turn and walk out through the doorway, knocking the string of beads hanging there on its way. Every time. They never told their family because they had always been told they had an overactive imagination. One summer, their cousin came to visit and stayed in their room. The next morning, the cousin came down to breakfast completely white-faced and said they could have the room back. When the family asked why, the cousin described word for word the same figure, the same hat, the same exit through the beads. The poster had never described any of this to anyone. Years later, after they had all moved out of the house, their mother told them something she had kept quiet for years. Her bedroom door was always open at night. Some nights she would lie awake and see a figure pass quickly down the hallway. She had not said anything because she had not wanted to frighten the children. 3 people, same house, same figure, no shared description between them until they were all safely out. The poster ended the post with something that stayed in the comments for days. They wrote, "The scariest part is not that it was there. It's that whatever it was, it had a routine. It went the same way every time, like it lived there, like we were the visitors." This one is written by someone who does not describe themselves as a good person, does not try to, just describes what happened and what they did and leaves you to sit with it. The poster had a best friend from childhood. They called her Jay. They had been close since they were kids, the kind of friendship that weathers everything because there is simply too much shared history between 2 people for it to break. Jay got into a relationship that the poster did not like. Something felt wrong about the man from the start, and the way that things sometimes feel wrong before you have words for why. The poster said things. Jay chose the relationship. The poster backed off the way you do when your friend has made a choice and you need to let them make it. Then Jay was gone. The circumstances were ambiguous enough that the investigation moved in multiple directions at once. The man was questioned. He had an alibi. It held. The case stalled. The poster knew something. A small thing, a detail they had seen with their own eyes on a day that intersected with the timeline in a way that, if they had reported it, would have complicated his alibi significantly. They did not report it. They did not report it because the thing they had seen also implicated them in something they had been doing that they needed to stay invisible. Not something violent, something personal and illegal and a quieter way that they believed would upend their own life completely if it surfaced. They waited. They chose themselves. They posted years later because Jay's case was in the news again, an anniversary piece, a photo of Jay in her 20s, which is where she would always be, because she never got further than that. The posters said they had looked at that photo for a long time before opening Reddit. They wrote, "I told myself I didn't really know, that I wasn't sure it mattered. I have spent every year since then knowing those were lies I told myself so I could keep being someone I could live with. I don't know if I can anymore. No update, account gone within a week." The poster was 8 years old when their family moved to a house bordered by a dense forest. The dogs were afraid of it immediately. Not the excitable fear of a dog who smells wildlife, the settled, low-grade, long-term fear of an animal that has registered something it does not want to approach. At night, there were sounds in the forest. Footsteps, heavy ones, moving in patterns that did not match any animal the family knew. Sometimes dark shapes were visible between the trees from the upstairs windows. Then came the knocking, on the back door, on the windows, at different hours of the night. Regular enough that the family installed cameras and built a fence. Nothing was ever caught on camera. The knocking continued. Then the voices started. They came from the tree line, And what made them unbearable was not that they were strange or monstrous or clearly inhuman. What made them unbearable was that they were familiar. The poster described hearing their mother's voice calling from the forest, their own name in their mother's exact cadence from the tree line at 10 o'clock at night while their mother was standing right next to them in the kitchen. Their mother heard it too. The family left the house on the final night after checking the security footage in the morning and finding that the back door, which they had locked themselves, had opened on its own. No person on the footage, just the door opening. The poster wrote that they are an adult now and rational about most things, that they went through a period of needing to explain what happened in order to live normally, that they eventually stopped trying. They wrote, "Whatever was in that forest knew our voices. It had been listening long enough to learn them. That is the part I will never stop thinking about. How long it had been out there, in the dark, learning the sounds of us." A Reddit user watched this happen in real time. They were on a local subreddit when a thread appeared about a missing woman. Her friends were confused. Her house was fine, her car was there, her dogs were home, but her phone was going to voicemail and her social media was still active. Not just active, posting normal things in her normal voice. Friends flooded the comments saying she was probably fine. Look, she's posting. A few people pushed back, said the posts felt slightly off, an opinion phrased a bit too generically, a reference to a show she didn't watch. Close enough to pass, but not quite right to the people who knew her best. The thread kept growing, friends tagging her in comments on her own posts. She never replied. Then the posts stopped, all at once. And what the investigation found was that the man who had taken her had her phone. He had spent months studying her social media before he made contact with her. He knew her well enough to mimic her for a limited window. He had bought exactly enough time. She was found alive, the best possible ending it could have had. But the person who posted about this wrote that what stayed with them was the period of watching her friends debate whether the posts were real while someone else was writing them. Watching people comfort each other by pointing at activity generated by the person who had taken her. They wrote, "Social media activity is not proof someone is safe. Sometimes it is proof of exactly the opposite." This one is about the weight of a secret over 20 years and what happens when the person carrying it finally puts it down in the wrong place. A daughter posted. Her parents had divorced when she was 6. Messy, ugly divorce. The mother got full custody because the father had been abusive. The daughter grew up with her mother's version of events and accepted it. She had no reason not to. When she was in her mid-20s, she reconnected with her father, cautiously, the way you do when you have kept someone at a distance and are now trying to decide if that distance was the right decision. They were driving together. He was off his medication for a condition she had no knowledge he had. He started talking. He talked the way people talk when the usual filters fail, when the brain stops doing the editorial work that normally keeps things inside. He told her about the night her mother claimed he had tried to tip their small boat to make her and the 6-year-old daughter drown. Her mother had always told this story as something her father said to intimidate her during the divorce, a threat, a lie told to scare her to stay. Her father, in the car, 20 years later, told her it was not a lie. He told her he had not been on his medication. He told her he had looked at the water and done the math that a person does when they aren't well. He told her he had put his hands on the side of the boat. He could not remember clearly what had stopped him. Something had. They were all still there. He told her this while driving, and then he seems to come back to himself, realize what he had said, and went quiet for the rest of the trip. The poster wrote that she spent the rest of that day sitting with her phone in her hand trying to decide who to call. Her mother? A therapist? No one? She did not know how to hold the fact that she had grown up in the aftermath of something that never been named for what it was. She wrote, "He doesn't remember telling me. I've never brought it up. I am the only person alive who knows both versions of that story, and neither version ends anywhere comfortable."